Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Game and Fish Advisory Board. We would have loved to have had these in person like we've done in the past, irrespective of last spring, of course. The pandemic and the crowding issues, we just couldn't. I know the advisory board members wanted to have it in person also, and it's certainly our preference to do it that way. But again, with COVID-19 issues the way they are, it's just better to have it this way. So we did the Western Districts last night. Tonight we're going to cover mostly Eastern District issues. We will, if you ask a question through the chat process here, we'll certainly try to get to it. But Dave Naring, who is out of Bismarck here, chairs the advisory board, is not in the Eastern District, but I wanted to recognize him, and also Travis Lear out of Alba, again, not necessarily in the Eastern District out of Alba, but he's our vice chair. But your district, Eastern District Advisory Board members are Ed Dosh out of Devil's Lake, Bruce Ellertson, Dwayne Hanson, Bruce is out of Dakota, Dwayne Hanson out of West Fargo, and Cody Sand from the way southeast part of the state, I believe Lemoore area of that area. So all great people, and really appreciate their work on the advisory board. I'm going to say it up front before I even get to the agenda. We did ask for questions prior to this meeting and last night's meeting, and we got a pile of them. We're going to answer as many as we possibly can, and also questions during the meeting that you may send in. We're very likely, and I would say a guarantee, we're not going to get to all of them because there are just so many, and we're going to limit this to a 2-hour meeting because we've learned from last spring that if we go much beyond an hour and a half to 2 hours, most people drop off. But I will guarantee you, if you send us a contact information, I guarantee you we will get back to you either via a phone call if we have your phone number or an email. We will contact you. It may not be immediate because there are so many questions, but we will get to you as soon as we can. The agenda we're going to tonight is I'll give a electronic posting update, a very brief update on the Outdoor Heritage Fund, and then Scott Peterson, the Deputy Director, will give an administrative rule changes, the process, and then Greg Power, the Chief of Fisheries, will really concentrate on the fishing tournament change that we had, the whys. And then Greg Link, our Chief of Conservation Communication, will give a hunter education certification update and what we hope to do and plan to do for 2021. Jeb Williams, our Wildlife Division Chief, will give us a wildlife update, and then comments on CWD and gender ID on big game animals and big game carcasses, I'm sorry. And then Brian Hosek, who is known as the brain of the Game and Fish, we'll talk about vendor bow tags and credit card fee assessments, and then we'll get into, as time allows, we'll get into some of the questions that have been asked, and if we can answer them during the presentation, we will also do that. So again, if you have questions, please send them in. We'll get to them if we can. I did want to make a few comments before we get going with the presentations. We've used the word unprecedented. You've heard it lots of times to describe the situation we've been in since March. I have to say I'm pretty proud of North Dakota, native North Dakotan as I am. I've always been proud of North Dakota, but probably not as much as I have been during this whole process. A lot of states around us suspended their spring activities, some summer activities in their natural resource agencies. Game and Fish, your Game and Fish did not do that. And I just want to give you some examples that we did, not only to keep the resource going this year, but for many years into the future. So our fisheries division did northern pike spawning, walleye spawning, stocked adult yellow perch out, courtesy docks. And again, all of this with some of the protocol that we had to follow for safety measures. ANS, they stocked 76,000 catchable trout, about 2,200 pounds, not 2,200 fish, 2,200 pounds of catchable channel catfish into 9 community fisheries that are located in smaller communities, well, not necessarily smaller communities, within communities across the state. 4,000 pounds, about 1,000 fish of catchable northern pike into community fisheries. Collected ANS samples, did ANS inspections, so the list goes on. This is what they normally do, but again, during the COVID crisis, it was extraordinarily important. And the Wildlife Division continued to sign up plots acres, and we now have over 800,000. We still have a goal of 1 million acres of plots. We dipped quite substantially when a major part of the CRP came off the landscape. We're up from 791,000 in 2019, so that's a lot of work, and that was exceptionally difficult because those plots biologists have to meet with these landowners many times at the table, and that was really difficult to do during COVID-19. Well, and still is at this point in time, but they put in about 2,500 acres of food plots, 2,000 acres of new grass out there, maintained rifle ranges on our wildlife management areas so they could continue to be open to the public, conducted mule deer surveys, and again, that list goes on. One thing that I'm exceptionally proud of, and these guys, the guys that did it should be too, we are in this, North Dakota is in the Central Flyway, which is part of the Flyway region. It's 11 states in the central United States going from North Dakota down to Texas on either side of it. We were the only state of those 11 states to conduct the annual May breeding duck survey. And that's extremely important. We've been doing that for over 70 years, so it's really important information for not only our waterfowl seasons, but those down south also. And then hunter education online. Our hunter education people really scrambled quickly, and Greg's going to talk about that. So rather than steal some of the stuff that he's going to talk about, I'll let him talk about that. But it was an extraordinary effort, and it's still ongoing, actually. So with that, I'm going to get into the formal presentations, talk about electronic posting. This really has been, if anybody's been following it, whether you're a sportsman, woman, or a landowner, really been a contentious issue in the legislative session for a number of years now. And during the last session, there was a bill that came in and passed through the Senate. It basically was defeated in the House, but it came through. They decided to go to an interim natural resource committee trying to resolve this issue. And I have to give an awful lot of credit to Senator Robert Erbely out of Blair. He did an excellent job, in my opinion, of putting this thing through, and I'll talk a little bit more about what actually came out of that committee. But during the session, they gave this interim natural resource committee the following charge: study access to public and private lands for hunting, trapping, fishing, and related issues, including trespass violations and penalties, and provide recommendations regarding a land access database and the capability of electronic posting. And at the direction of legislative management, Information Technology Department and Game and Fish shall establish an electronic posting and hunter access information system in up to 3 counties. And that committee actually chose, as the 3 counties, were Slope, Ramsey, and Richland, and they wanted to get it spread across the state. Of course, Slope is pretty important for mule deer hunting. Ramsey, certainly important for waterfowl hunting, and then Richland County for a little bit of everything down there. So, and those counties were willing and able to do it at that point in time. And I have to emphasize that even though those landowners were able to post electronically through our website, or through our electronic licensing system, they still had to post physically because there were no laws that allowed anybody to be cited for trespassing or hunter trespass on electronically posted land. So I'll get into that in just a little bit. And as with a lot of other things, COVID-19 created some issues, and ITD, or the Information Technology Department, was pulled off on some other issues. So to expedite the development of the application, we offered our online licensing platform, our electronic licensing system, for the development of that electronic posting application. And that was made available to landowners by the end of April, and they had a deadline of July 15th to actually put their land on there if they wanted it electronically posted. And at that time, at the deadline, 79 landowners had utilized electronic posting on about 38,000 acres. And those landowners are currently being surveyed to say, how easy was it to use? What was the applicability? Would you do it again? Some anecdotal information that we've heard is, I was able to do this quicker than it was to find a staple gun to put up the poster. So to me, that's a positive statement. The electronically posted land is also shown on our plots website in the plots maps, and it was in our plots guide. And we'll be surveying select hunters to determine their usability of this information also. We have not yet done that, but we will be doing that in the next month or so. The Interim Natural Resource Committee actually concluded its business on September 25th, and they presented 3 bill drafts that are going to go forward to the 2021 session. And just very big summarization, I guess. The first would extend the pilot study for 2 more years with no penalties, but would include all 53 counties in the state. The second bill, again, these are drafts, would implement electronic posting for all counties, meaning all 53 counties, and add the same penalties for hunting on electronically posted land as if it were physically posted. And again, they can still physically post it if they want to. They're not mandated to go with electronic posting. The third bill has actually 2 sections, one dealing with criminal trespass and one dealing with hunter trespass. On the criminal trespass portion, it would change the name requirement on a posting sign from must appear on the sign to may appear on a sign, meaning if you put a sign up, you don't have to sign it, but if you want to be contacted, you would sign it, and that's the may appear. And that the must appear is currently in law right now, so this would be a change, and that's again on criminal trespass. The bill adds that land enclosed by a fence is automatically posted, but it really doesn't contain a definition of fence now, and this, I haven't seen the language, but as I understand it, it says except for hunting and fishing. So if a land is surrounded by a fence, and it would be closed to criminal trespass, but not for hunting and fishing, again, unless it was posted. The hunting trespass portion has the same language as the criminal trespass on the signature requirement, meaning change it from must appear to may appear on the sign. And I have to say is, these are very draft bills. I have not seen the final language that's going to go to the legislature. So if you are interested in this bill, which I'm guessing a lot of you are, please pay attention to what's coming out in the legislature, and you'll have to make up your own mind on how you stand on it. I do have to say is there is, and again, this is going to be, I think, extremely important. This Saturday, December 5th, from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the North Dakota Wildlife Federation is sponsoring a summit to more fully discuss this electronic posting issue in the bill draft. So if you're interested, go to your website that's shown on the screen, and that's northdakotawildlife.org, and you'll get a little pop-up screen that you see in green there that says NWDF. You'll get a pop-up screen that shows you how to join the summit. So this has been an extremely important and very time-intensive and labor-intensive issue. So please join in if you're interested in, and I just say have an opinion on the issue. The next thing is the Outdoor Heritage Fund. I'm going to make this very briefly. The Outdoor Heritage Fund was really created in 2013 by the North Dakota legislature to meet 4 directives. If you can move to the slides. Okay, there we go. Second slide. With the first directive is access to land, but it includes projects that create habitat for fish and wildlife also, very similar to our plots program. The second directive would be agricultural stewardship, which are the projects that improve, maintain, and restore water quality, soil conditions, plant diversity, animal systems, and support other practices of stewardship to enhance farming and ranching. And the idea behind that is if we can get some changes out in the landscape, that ag practice can continue, but it can also be good for wildlife. The third directive is habitat restoration, and that would be to develop, enhance, conserve, and restore wildlife and fish habitat on private and public lands. And the fourth directive is outdoor recreation areas, which is conserve natural areas for recreation through the establishment and development of parks and other recreation areas. The vast majority of the applications and the funding that have come in have been from large organizations that really have the ability. And actually this last round of applications that the Industrial Commission just authorized, I think it was just last week, was over $11.5 million and some great projects on there. If you're interested in seeing what they are, go to the Industrial Commission website, click in the Outdoor Heritage Fund. All of the projects that have been funded are out there, and there's some really, really good ones. So we do have to thank and I would say our partners out there that have done a tremendous job in basically supporting and delivering these projects. But we rarely see projects from the smaller entities, smaller projects. It doesn't have to be $1 million or a $500,000 project. It can be a $10,000 or $5,000 project that meets one of those directives. So would really like to encourage fish and wildlife clubs, community clubs across the state to look at it and apply. There's a little over, I think, almost $2.5 million remaining in that fund at this point in time, and current law allows for $7.5 million a year as part of the trickle-down money from oil monies, which we may or may not get that this year with oil production being down. But there is what I'll call a kicker on it. You have to be a nonprofit. If you aren't a nonprofit, it's not a deal killer. Go through your local park board, go through your county water resource board. They are local entities that are available. It can be a state entity, it can be a local governmental entity, it can be a tribal entity, or a nonprofit, but there are always ways around it. So we certainly encourage anybody out there, if you have a good idea, and there are a lot of great ideas on it, they don't have to be huge, please take advantage of it, because we'd love to see those type of applications coming in. The information on how to apply, again, is on the Industrial Commission website. It's up here on the screen, and applications are shown there. If you have any questions, just don't hesitate to contact Bob Kylan, who's chairing the committee, and Bob's a great guy, very informative, very intelligent individual, runs great meetings, or Andrea Fanning, who deals with the Outdoor Heritage Fund at the Industrial Commission. On the numbers at your screen, they can certainly lead you in the right direction. So with that, I am going to turn we're working off of 2 podiums tonight, so I'm going to turn that over to Scott Peterson to continue for his presentation.
Thank you, Terry. And as Terry mentioned, my name is Scott Peterson. I'm Deputy Director for the department, and I'd like to take a few minutes just to give you a quick overview of the process for changing any of our administrative rules. Agency administrative rules are essentially a codification of all rules of state administrative agencies, including the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Our administrative rules are defined in Title 30 of the North Dakota Administrative Code, and the department updates or changes certain rules periodically for several different reasons. Some of those reasons for proposing changes may include bringing them into compliance with new legislation, eliminating unnecessary language, responding to public comments, or for enabling improvements in resource management, just to name a few. Greg Power, our Chief of Fisheries, is going to address one of the recent changes in greater detail, more specifically the change in fishing tournament rules. So essentially, he'll be addressing the why of that particular change. And obviously, every administrative rule change has a different why. I'd like to briefly outline the process for implementing all changes, because we believe it's also important for our customer base, those who are directly affected by these changes, to understand the how of the overall process. First, our proposed changes are published in every official county newspaper in the state, as well as the date for a public hearing. The hearing is held solely for the purpose of soliciting input from the public on the proposed changes. Input can be presented orally at that hearing or submitted electronically for a 2-week period after the hearing. All input is then compiled, consolidated, reviewed, and our official responses to those questions and comments are then compiled and sent to the Attorney General's office for review. The final step in the process is for the agency to appear before the Administrative Rules Committee of the North Dakota Legislature. Only after all of those steps are followed can rules become officially enacted. It's important to our agency that we be completely transparent when proposing administrative rule changes. For this latest round of administrative rule changes, I can tell you that more than 13,000 individuals who are signed up to receive text and/or email alerts from the department each received an alert notifying them of the upcoming proposed changes on May 20th and June 8th. We also highlighted these proposed changes in a news release on May 20th and then again on June 8th. Our news releases are printed in every daily and county newspaper in the state and are sent to each radio and television station for distribution. In total, 145 media outlets receive our news releases. We posted these proposed changes on our Facebook page on May 20th and again on June 8th, and we also displayed them on our website homepage continually from May 20th through June 28th as well. While the process may seem somewhat tedious, we believe the process is important and allows for ample opportunity for public input. As an example, one of the proposed changes in this latest round would have changed our rules for how we permit dog training on our wildlife management areas. But because we received numerous questions and comments regarding those proposed changes, we removed those proposed changes from further consideration until we can meet with the interested parties and further discuss options for solving the issue. With the exception of that one rule, all of the others were approved and became effective on October 1. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Power, our Fisheries Division Chief, to give an overview of statewide fisheries issues and a more in-depth presentation on the recent change to fishing tournaments.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. As Scott indicated, my name is Greg Power. I'm the Fisheries Division Chief here at the Game and Fish Department. Tonight I'm going to primarily talk about fishing tournaments, give an update on a couple issues with fishing tournaments. But first I thought we'd touch on something that Terry touched on earlier, and that is just a quick overview of the North Dakota's state of the state fishery. In the words of a famous singer and weatherman, it's going to be a bright, sunshiny day, and that's kind of the prospects when it comes to fishing. Tomorrow, the next day, the following day, this ice fishing season and the next few years, hopefully, we're sitting in really good shape statewide. All that water, all that rain we had last fall and snow in October of 2019 has really set up the state still today. Even though we've been on a very dry cycle for 8 months, we're in good shape. Our lake levels are up maybe 4 or 5 feet from where they were 2 years ago. And that sets the stage, sets the table for some good fishing, maybe short term, but in particularly longer term. So we got a lot to look forward to coming down the road. Again, Terry touched on this, and there's I don't want to belabor the point, but just to bring you up to speed in some of our activities with the fisheries staff, we had a very positive spring. It's always a challenge with the wind and the snow and the cold, but our crews got together and got all the eggs we needed, both pike and walleye eggs, filled up the egg batteries at the 2 federal hatcheries. We were able to stock near record numbers of about everything, it seemed. Pike, walleye. This fall we had a very good salmon run. So everything on the production end of things are good. We got near record number of lake stock. Maybe the only it's not a concern, but one challenge that we have internally for ourselves is moving ahead in 2021 is our request from the hatcheries will be record setting because of all these new opportunities, all these new waters out there. We will need to take a record number of eggs, and we will need to have record production at the hatchery. So that's something that stay tuned and look forward to. Our development crew did the normal great things they've done out there, 3 or 4 new boat ramps and new lakes, a dozen new docks, some fishing piers, fish cleaning, a couple of new fish cleaning stations. So very busy crew. Our management research folks did their normal test netting, record set of test netting, monitoring of our lakes, checking the fish populations. Again, good things. We're kind of have a young fishery out there, which is good long term. But there are a lot of smaller fish in our lakes, but give it a year or two, things are definitely catchable fish to be had. And then lastly, on our fisheries crew, maybe I need to touch on is ANS, aquatic nuisance species, zebra mussels. That's kind of the poster child. Record amount of monitoring again that went on by our crews, watercraft inspections, everything ANS they got done. The only probably it's kind of a good news, bad news. The bad news being that we did find zebra mussels in one new lake, Lake Lemoore by the town of Lemoore. That's never good. But the good news is that was only new infestation of any ANS in North Dakota. So given what the problems they're finding in other states and provinces around us, to only have a couple, still literally a handful of at least zebra mussel infested waters, that's that a boy, that a girl to everybody out there. Thank you for complying with the laws. There are rules and regs on the books when it comes to watercraft, live wells, stuff like that. just please continue to comply with the rules and we can really slow down the spread of ANS in the state. With that, we're going to talk a little bit on fishing tournaments. A little bit of background first that needs to be shared with everybody. Just gives a department perspective, gives a department's perspective and its constituency. There are roughly about 150,000 resident and 60,000 non-resident individuals who buy a fishing license in North Dakota every year. So somewhere it varies between 200 and 220,000 licensed anglers in North Dakota. The vast majority of those people are not tournament anglers. When it comes to tournament issues, the opposing views from both sides can be very extreme. The department has always managed to the middle, trying to find some common ground. Fortunately, for most of our anglers in our state, they are very reasonable. A couple other things, fishing in North Dakota is actually kind of big business. It generates about $1.7 billion in gross business volume annually. But despite the dollars and cents, the department has never managed a resource for individual economic return. The department views all licensed anglers, regardless if they fish in a $100,000 boat or from shore with a bamboo pole, the same. And over the years and decades, we had this process. We have a combination of administrative rules, which again, we'll talk on briefly here tonight, and some tournament protocol that helps guide the department that we utilize. And between those two things, we've really greatly reduced conflict between both the tournament and non-tournament anglers over the last few decades. Again, more background, just where we're at with fishing tournaments in the state. These are permitted tournaments. It's been a steady gain over the last 25 years to where now we're about 160 are permitted annually. It seems to have maybe perhaps plateaued here in the last few years, but in that neighborhood about 160 annually. Of those tournaments, and it's almost every year it's the same, approximately or exactly half of them are on the big waters, and the big waters being Sakakawea, Missouri River, Oahe, and or Devil's Lake. And it's on those waters that if we have issues, it's going to be on the big waters that we have issues with different fishing groups, tournament, non-tournament fishermen, sometimes between different tournament sponsors. It comes to tournaments, and Scott touched on this, that it's not unlike a whole lot of things that Game and Fish manages. We do have statute in place. There's a law on the books in Century Code. It's been there for close to 40 years. And along with that, to help guide us are administrative rules. And those administrative rules is what we're going to at least one of them we're going to discuss tonight, kind of the why we made a change here. Here just recently, I want to share this with everybody, asking for comment, and this is just here in the last week prior to the meeting, the comments, just a snippet of the comments we received when it comes to fishing tournament. And this kind of really does exemplify how some people view them, and it's all over the board. And as you can read, go through this list of stuff, it's anything and everything from the department being greedy to we favor big tournaments, that we just on and on. One I want to leave with on this particular page, though, is the very last one. This question, which I'll follow up in the next page, is why was the recent change made to remove the $5,000 cap from the North Dakota fee calculation? Why was that made? And that's kind of the why. This question was asked by at least 29 individuals, exactly verbatim, by the way, but it came from Iowa to Florida, from West Fargo to Devil's Lake. That same question was asked. So that's kind of the why. Scott talked about the how. I'll talk on one particular issue, the why on a fishing tournament administration rule change. What is the issue? Well, since 1984, all tournaments, fishing tournaments in North Dakota, so that's 36 years, 37 years now, must pay a minimum of 10%, a minimum, I should stress that too, a minimum of 10% of its entry fees toward a fishery conservation project. However, in the past 20 years, this requirement was capped at a maximum of $5,000. Effective a couple months ago, 1st of October, this cap was removed, meaning all tournaments now need to pay the full 10%, again, minimum, towards a fishery conservation project. What is a fishery conservation project? Well, it's a whole number of things could be eligible for such a project. They are intended to reinvest some of the tournament monies back into the local resource. They may include developing fishing opportunities, upgrading boats, ramps, docks, fish cleanings, a lot of O&M on the infrastructure that's in place, and sometimes actually educating the fishing public, especially the youth. How does the department decide or determine where the money goes? Very popular. We do our darndest, and I'd say about 90-95% of the time we're able to reallocate that money right back to the local managing entity. That could be a park board, water board, sometimes cities and counties themselves, wildlife clubs. There's a whole host of partners out there. But we try to put that money right back where the tournament was held, and it usually goes towards a boating access project. And on the right side of this table or page, there's a little award that we internally give out, the Fisheries Division Appreciation Award, to some of our partners. Give it out annually to an entity that's demonstrated leadership and a commitment in providing and/or expanding fishing and boating related facilities. And as you can see, in the last 10 years, it's in all corners of North Dakota, and it's all types of clubs, from big to small. Their clubs are water boards, park boards. It's a little bit of everything, and that is North Dakota. Those are our partners out there. Currently, we have about 835 contacts, clubs, park boards, water boards, so forth. So this doesn't necessarily apply to tournaments. It just kind of gives you a snippet of what who we work with to make things happen in terms of development. Why was this $5,000 fishery conservation project cap removed? Well, the answer is pretty straightforward. It's simply an issue of balance and fairness. A question that was often asked in the past was, why did there appear to be preferential treatment for large tournaments with large payouts? In order to be fair, moving forward, all tournaments are now responsible to pay the full 10%. This graph here kind of hopefully shows it, displays it. If you look at the green arrow, well, first off, I should say this is combined all the tournaments, roughly 280 tournaments over a 2-year period, 2018 and 19. We did not include 2020 because of a lot of tournaments canceled due to COVID. So to get a real good picture, we just used the 2 years prior to that. But there's about 280 tournaments paid in something towards a conservation fee. And of that, 95% paid their full 10%. They fell below that $5,000 or $50,000 in entry fees, $5,000 cap. So for those tournaments moving forward, nothing changes. This rule impacts them not at all. For the other 5%, the red arrow there, moving forward, that is that very small group we're talking about, that they no longer have that cap, so they will be paying the full 10%. Another way of showing that is just the entry fees themselves. If you there's roughly 155 tournaments a year that fall or have $50,000 or less in entry fees. If you look at them, they're cumulatively, they bring in maybe their entry fees of all 155 tournaments, about $650,000, $700,000, pay the 10%, so it's $65,000, $70,000 goes towards a conservation project. There's just, again, that same handful of tournaments, they've paid in the past much less as a percentage in real dollars and cents, it's essentially the same. So their entry fees in 5 to 7 tournaments are the same as 155 tournaments. But they've paid less because they didn't need to pay more. I mean, there's nothing wrong. That's the way it was at the time. So that works out to maybe 4 or 5%, considerably less as a percentage than the other tournaments. So trying to answer some of the questions that have been asked. One is asked in various forms, but basically paraphrasing, what will be gained by the Game and Fish and their greed in enacting this rule? And it's important, this is part of that. It's unfortunate because there is some misinformation out there, and we like to deal with facts, and sometimes there are times there's information floating around that is just dead wrong and people jump on it, and that's just too bad. But the reality is no tournament conservation monies are used by the department for any administrative or any other expense. 100% of the money in conservation go back to local entities to improve the fishery resource. Another question, this change will effectively stop all tournaments large and small in the state of North Dakota. It's another myth, some more misinformation. That's not true. We've already approved 65 tournaments for next year. Again, of the approximately 160 permitted tournaments, more than 150 will experience absolutely no change. 5 to 7 other tournaments will now need to pay the full 10%. So another way of looking at that, some people say, well, what they're going to be paying out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I heard millions of dollars of impact. Again, here's fact. What's the cost of this? Based on 2018 and 19 information, those 5 to 7 other tournaments will now need to pay the full 10%. But for most of these, the increase will be minimal. And you can see in this table, we're talking as low as, well, in some cases, nothing. Some one out-of-state tournament pays the same as they have in the past. But on the low end, $200 up to a few thousand. There's just one tournament in particular that pays out considerably more than they have in the past. So then another follow-up question to that is, what tournaments are not impacted? Well, basically all of them, most of them. The Van Hook Classic, just to name a few of the bigger name tournaments: Van Hook Classic, the Big Maudie, the Outlaw Walleye, the Casino Circuit, the Devil's Lake Chamber, the Adult Teen Challenge, the Energy of North Dakota, the River Rat, plus 140 other tournaments. Nothing changes again. So there is no impact to them. Winding down on questions, this change may prevent large out-of-state tournaments with entry fees of $200,000, $300,000 or more from coming to North Dakota, as they cannot afford to pay the conservation fees of $20,000, $30,000 or more. Preventing large out-of-state tournaments from coming to North Dakota is never the purpose of eliminating the cap. It is acknowledged that attracting large, high-profile tournament sponsors who have high entry fees and very large payouts are sought by some local economic development entities as a means to bring in outside money into a small community. This local benefit for a community needs to be balanced with the need to treat all tournaments the same. Assessing the same percentage toward a fishery conservation project and making no exceptions appears to be the fair and balanced approach. I believe this may be the last question, thank God. So how much money will be generated by fishing tournaments for fishery conservation projects? Moving forward, assuming all tournaments continue as they have in the past and all tournaments pay the full 10%, about $130,000 to $140,000 a year will be generated to reinvest into the local resources. And for context here, in our development program, North Dakota currently has 250 public boat ramps, 700 courtesy docks, 160 fishing piers, 60 fish cleaning stations, and 280 vault toilets. The cost of just one new enclosed fish cleaning station runs in $120,000 to $160,000 range. For those that are interested in even more information about fishing tournaments, I urge you to go to our website. The link is circled here, but just go to the fishing tab and you can go to, within that you can go to frequently asked questions, a whole bunch of different information there. The one right at the top deals with fishing tournaments and gives questions and answers. So I urge you to go there. I'm winding down on tournaments, and I think this is, some good news is that our belief, the department's belief, that the combination of applying that protocol I touched on earlier, tournament protocol, moving tournaments around, not having more than one tournament on the same ramp and consecutive weekends, a whole bunch of criteria like that, and the understanding that all tournament anglers contribute 10% entry fees toward a conservation project has improved the acceptance of tournaments with the general fishing public over the last 30 years. And that's where we all want to get to. I mean, you're never going to get 100% agreement on all sides, but I think we've narrowed that gap a lot. We've maybe have a little ways to go, but we've come a long way. So I guess with that, that's it for tournaments. I would, while I'm up at the podium, I do have two other slides, questions that were asked yesterday and that probably carry over to tonight. So I want to hit them while we got the slides up here. One question that's very common, perhaps Devil's Lake area, well, for sure, not perhaps, for sure Devil's Lake area comes up by multiple people every year, but also as I asked last night for Sakakawea, occasionally Lake Oahe, the bigger fisheries is the status of the walleye fisheries, and then the need to further regulate those walleye fisheries, meaning a slot limit, one over a length limits of some sort. Our biologists tell us, and they update this fact sheet at the very bottom where the blue arrow is. I urge everybody to, again, go to this fishing tab. The website is in the box here. Go to this site and they'll give you the biological information. Is probably way too much detail for most people to want to absorb tonight. But if you're interested, go there. It's some good information as to why and why not. And it's updated annually. So the answer is very long, but that's a short answer to actually a fairly complicated question. The other one is that was asked last night, and we need to share this information also, is about 3 or 4 years ago, we started made available on our website the information from our netting, our surveys in the summer. Some really good information. Some of the angling public likes to look at length frequencies of where the monster perch at, or the big walleye, big pike, or whatever it might be. So our test netting results, we put it out there kind of for public consumption. You can find it at this, again, at this site. It's not current yet. We shoot to have that information out there by, hopefully in a couple of weeks, certainly before the holidays. So you can go there and just keep looking forward to it. We'll probably put a news release out when it is available, but we've seen that's very popular with the public that like to do a little bit of research. So look forward to that in the days, or at least in the next couple of weeks. So, all right, with that ends my part of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg Link, who's going to talk about the hunter education certification process.
Good evening, folks. As Mr. Power mentioned, my name is Greg Link. I'm the Chief of Conservation Communications Division. And I'm happy to give you a rundown on our hunter education, how we plan to approach it in 2021. If you recall, last year at our spring advisory board meetings, I gave you kind of a overview of how we were going to try to plan to approach it right in the middle of the COVID. With the gathering restrictions and the the kind of the safety concerns that were starting at that time. Tonight I'll give you a quick recap of how that went this past spring and summer, and then I'll also run down our plan for how we're going to approach it in this coming year. So most of you know that in North Dakota, our state law requires anybody born after 1961 who's 12 years of age or older needs to complete and pass a hunter education course in order to obtain a hunting license in our state. North Dakota law also provides a provision known as the apprentice license. We could call it our try it and you may like it provision. It provides an opportunity for a prospective hunter to be issued a one-time, one-year apprentice hunter license. And with this apprentice license, an individual may hunt small game and deer if accompanied by an adult at least 18 years of age and licensed in North Dakota. Before I get into our COVID response, I'll give you a glimpse of what our hunter education certification, kind of how it goes in normal times. Our hunter education course traditionally is taught by over 700 dedicated volunteer instructors, and I just want to give a shout out to them. Tonight, they've been the backbone of our program for decades, and we teach those the hunter education through two methods: the traditional classroom course, which is an in-person class with the instructor right there with the students. It's a minimum of 14 hours in-person class, and students must be 11 years of age by the end of the calendar. And that was 95% of our courses were taught in that way, or 95% of our certifications were accomplished this way. Then at some years ago, we started a home study course, and the way that we approached that, the first night you had to come out and show up in person, get oriented about how the online home study would go over some handling, firearm actions, things like that. Then the student would go home, and they could then go online and complete that home study course on their own. And then to finish the course, though, they had to come back and have one more in-person written test in firearms handling practical. And at first we started that, it was like 16 years of age. We just wanted older students. But then we did go to an 11 or 13 years old just a few years ago. The department averages nearly 4,000 to 5,000 hunter ed students a year with certifications. And those are completed in our communities across the state by those instructors, real close to where those students live. The bulk of the classroom coursework occur from January through May, just prior to DEER application deadline. There's always a lot of demand for classes and sometimes difficulty getting into class because of student conflicts with their schedules, as well as limited classes available in certain areas. So last spring, right in the midst of that busy time period, the COVID situation hit. Limited gathering restrictions, again, health concerns about people being in the densities of a classroom. We had only certified 1,000 students at that time, and so we were looking at estimating about 3,000 additional students that were going to need to be certified prior to the DEER application and the onset of fall huntings in September. So we knew we had our work cut out for us. So the way to approach that, we first stressed that anybody that wasn't actually 12, they didn't need the course yet, that they didn't, just kind of wait off a year. And then we also told if you hadn't used that apprentice provision yet, utilize that for this year to kind of help reduce that bottleneck that we were going to be experiencing. And then to address all the other students that actually needed it this year, we implemented our two-phase COVID contingency certification. And, we kind of built that on the fly with the approach that, okay, first off, we'd allow temporary Hunter Edge certification if a student went online and used that home study curriculum. We also built some additional videos that went along with it to kind of help take over for that. What we used to have was that first night orientation. But by doing that, you would get your temporary Hunter education number that you could use then to get your DEER application in. But we told everybody right from the get-go, then we're going to phase 2 is they have to be required a full certification testing. We were hoping that by the end of summer, before the onset of fall, that the pandemic restrictions would be somewhat reduced and that we'd be able to do those practicals fairly easy. But we also said that had to be completed by the end of 2020. Otherwise, that temporary certification would be voided out. So how did it go? I'll give you a rundown of the results. Approximately 1,800 students completed that online portion to get their temporary certification. And then our own staff went out and conducted about 80 follow-up testing sessions around the state, often in our own facilities, in our shop spaces, where we could really spread people out to achieve and complete those full certifications. We had approximately 1,200 students that then completed that full testing requirement. The majority of those students did very well. So that proved that this online testing, kids do it. They do it well. We do have that leaves about 600 students that we have not completed that full certification, that testing requirement yet. And so we know who you are. We've sent you reminders. We have your email addresses. So if you're serious about hunting next year, you need to get that taken care of, and we will have a kind of a last chance round of testing that will be offered here in December. But after that, by the end of the year, again, we'll void out that temporary hunter certification that they had achieved earlier. So I just want to give you a rundown of our testing pandemic protocol. We will be requiring masks. We didn't this summer. That requirement wasn't in effect yet, but using our large venues, we space students and instructors out, and all the tables, training, firearms, other training aids are sanitized between student use and handlings. We also will be reducing that occupancy. So, I mean, we will have multiple sessions, as many sessions as we need to get those kids through practicals. So for 2021, the approach is to utilize that. We suspect that this isn't going to phase out real fast, this pandemic, and so we're going to be prepared to hit it hard. We will allow our volunteer instructors to teach normal classes using that pandemic protocol in their communities, if and when that pandemic requirements allow that, or as they feel comfortable to do so themselves. We have a lot of instructors that are kind of my age bracket, and so they're in that health risk age class, and so we would just emphasize, don't expect that. We don't want to rely on those classroom courses to be going on in the communities around the state, and so we really want to encourage our folks out there to use our online course that we've tuned up especially for this next year. And so we will do it pretty much the same that we did this last year, other than the fact that it won't be a first phase temporary certification, then second phase, it'll be all in one. So you get your online course taken care of, and knowing that 2 weeks following that, we're going to have a practical around. We're going to be doing that in all our urban areas, with the hope that most students will only have about an hour's drive from that testing site. So we'll be announcing those as they come on board. So stay tuned. And that's about all I have for you. I think that'll help us deal with that tide we're going to have, because there's some that put off, based on our request last year, put off a year, and they used the apprentice license. So we're going to have some probably additional folks we're going to need to get through. So bear with us. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to our Chief of Wildlife, Jeb Williams, and he'll be talking about big game issues.
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, everyone. And as Greg mentioned, my name is Jeb Williams, the Wildlife Division Chief. Wildlife Division is made up of 3 sections. Our private lands section, which most people equate with our PLATS program. Our wildlife resource management section manages wildlife management areas across the state, approximately 225,000 acres for public recreation. And our game management section, which is responsible for all surveys, research, season setting information for all of our game species. So we're going to do our best with this. We do always appreciate the feedback especially at the fall advisory board meetings for the wildlife division, simply because we set the table in the spring and the summer pretty much for all of our seasons, and then in the fall all the cards have been dealt, and it's really nice to hear from the public as far as what kind of fall they had. And obviously on the eastern end of the state tonight, we talk an awful lot about deer. I am missing my bowl of chili up in Fordville a little bit, just for the fine folks up there. It's always good to have that information and camaraderie that we get up in Fordville. So, and we probably with the number of deer licenses, we increased in that area. Hopefully we made a few more people happy. We know that's been a frustration over the last number of years in the eastern part of the state as far as the demand for deer licenses, and obviously the number of deer has gone down quite a bit in the last number of years. And so we've been very conservative with licenses, trying to reestablish some deer numbers in that area. And so it's been a slow process, but over the last couple of years we have seen some improvements in the eastern part of the state, and so that's a good thing. One of the things I do want to talk about and share with everyone tonight is, normally, as I mentioned, when we're at our fall advisory board meetings, we're asking how deer season went. We're getting, those observations from folks. So we've been experimenting over the last several years with our hunter harvest surveys, questionnaires that go out to the public, and doing more and more of those online. And it really provides a department with quicker feedback as far as that data and that information goes, and it helps us, make those decisions a little quicker, I guess, versus in the past. And so we did that for the first time for deer this year, and as of today, our response rate has been about 50% back from people that did provide us with email addresses. And right now, our success rate is just about 69% for deer across the state for the year. And so we'll see as the remaining surveys come in, but we have it's a pretty good sample size already, so I don't imagine it's gonna dip down below that too much or go above that too much. But so for those individuals out there who did receive that, you still please send that in via email. We're going to send you another reminder about that, and then if we still don't hear from, we're going to send you a paper copy. So always a good reminder to help us out with those surveys. That's a great tool for us to have to be able to gauge where we're at in the state. I'm going to talk about chronic wasting disease real quick and just a brief update. We did sample the western part of the state this year, along with the 3F2, where we've had CWD in that unit since 2009. Just a little over 2,000 heads were dropped off, deer heads were dropped off at the department locations where we set up across the state. Thank you very much to the businesses and that helped us with that effort. And again, thanks for hunters for doing that. Our turnaround time for the testing is getting, we're seeing improvements on that each and every year. And so we already have some results back. Unfortunately, we did get 2 positives back from Unit 3F2. So the good news is there, it's in 3F2, and we definitely expect there continue to be some positives in that area. That is the area where we first discovered CWD in North Dakota. But as to date, we have not had any positive results back in any other of the western units as well. Something else new that hunters can seek that information if you did drop a deer head off at one of the collection sites on your North Dakota Game and Fish Department profile. When you go in to purchase your licenses, that process, you can also now check your test results for CWD. So that's kind of a nice feature for people to go in there and be able to actually check on that, so they're not having to call us or wait to be contacted, things like that. So just a brief CWD update, and now I'm going to move on and talk about something related to CWD. We've had some confusion in the last number of years as far as transportation, especially the transportation of the harvested deer carcass or the head coming back to your place of residence. People have long known in North Dakota that a deer carcass or boned out meat must be accompanied by the head to the final place of storage. And so we're looking to clarify and clean up some language in our deer proclamation, along with our CWD proclamation that has been there, for since 2010, 2009, when we first implemented CWD restrictions, regulations in North Dakota. And so we're just looking to clean that language up a little bit. And so that's still going to be the case, that a deer or carcass or boned out meat must be accompanied by the head to the final place of storage. But we are going to put some exceptions in there. And again, the clarifying aspect of this is that dropping the head off at a CWD game and fish collection site within the unit is certainly an exception. Because the CWD proclamation does not allow an individual hunter to come out of a CWD unit, CWD area, with the deer head or the spinal column. And so obviously that deer head must stay within that area, within that unit, and we would certainly prefer that it go to a drop-off site to where we can have that testing information. Another option that we're looking at as a proposal here too, another exception would be, so if you tagging the deer, obviously, as currently required, then taking 2 pictures using a cell phone with date and time stamp turned on. One picture of the entire animal at the kill site with the tag attached, and a second picture of a close-up to the tag so that the tag information is readable. And what that allows for somebody to have a little more flexibility within that unit. If they are taking it to a taxidermist within that unit, they're dropping it off at a friend's house, that type of thing. And so if somebody has that documentation of those pictures or those photos, and if they're asked by a game warden or other law enforcement officer, they're going to need to provide that. If you decide that you want to leave your deer head in the field, which is allowed, you're allowed to do. We would, again, prefer that you would drop it off at a collection site, but if you choose to leave it in the field, so after taking pictures and saving them, the ear or the antler with the tag attached must be cut off and accompany the meat or carcass while in transport. So again, just looking at some options, clearing up a few things within our with CWD units, but also allowing for some additional flexibility with people outside of CWD units as well. So this will be something that we'll continue to talk about here over the winter. Hopefully get some feedback from the public. I would think it's going to be fairly positive, simply because it just allows some additional flexibility that's not there right now. But we're also open to some different ideas and options on this topic as well. Moving on now to talk about deer goals, and that's something that the department has on our radar every 5 years. We started in 2004, I believe, was the first year we did, and I'll just go back a few years here where you can see in 2010 our goal was 125,000 deer, licenses, 125,000 licenses, not deer. And then we had some pretty significant changes on the landscape. We had some significant winter weather between 2010 and 2015, where our deer herd really took a big decline. So our license goals set in 2015 were at 75,000. We're just finishing up the 5-year process of that now. We just over 69,000 licenses for this year, and so we didn't meet the 75,000, but we're going to. I think all indications there that more people still want more deer on the landscape, and so our goal setting for 2020 is going to be higher than the goal of 75,000. The challenge with this is the department, at least in the previous years anyway, it's a very public process. The department, we visit with each district offices and make trips around the state visiting with folks about it, our own folks. We obviously want feedback at advisory board meetings. So this is something that has taken a little bit of a delay due to COVID, but one of the things is we're quite a bit different situation right now. Is we pretty much, I think most people agree that they would wish for the department to strive for additional deer on the landscape to provide additional opportunities. So stay tuned on this process. We're going to be working on it, but it might be delayed just a little bit. Moving on, and on a real positive note, we have some real positive things to talk about when it comes to big 3 type opportunities in North Dakota, elk and moose. But bighorn sheep had a bit of a scare in 2015 with disease issues, and Brett Wiedemann, our bighorn sheep biologist, does a phenomenal job of his management and working with hunters and different opportunities that are out there. We saw that this last year with the opportunity where he worked with 3 affiliated tribes and bringing in sheep from Rocky Boy Indian Reservation in Montana. And those sheep are doing tremendous, by the way. The reproduction in that area of the sheep that were brought in they're just doing very well. So it's a really neat thing to see. And this year was also just a really neat year to see, because some really big rams out on the landscape. And this year there was the largest ram ever harvested in North Dakota, the 2nd largest, and the 5th largest. And so that's it's one of the unique things we're able to do with bighorn sheep. We don't trophy manage for any other big game species in North Dakota, but with bighorn sheep we have the ability to do that. That's what that's the goal, is to remove the old mature rams out of the population, and so it is something that really works out well with hunters that do get extremely lucky and draw the bighorn sheep license in North Dakota. So just some real positive things. We did have a question last night about the Southern Badlands project, where we did talk with the public a couple years back about culling the bighorn sheep in the Southern Badlands because they're not doing very well. They have had disease in that population for several years, and we've kind of put that on pause because we can't bring in healthy sheep into that area. If we were to go in there and cull those sheep out of there, we've evaluated our release sites of new bighorn sheep coming into that area, and we just don't feel comfortable with the close proximity of domestic sheep around those locations where the wild sheep can intermingle with domestic sheep and then bring back some virus and bacteria that can be very deadly to bighorn sheep. So at this point in time, we've put that on pause and going to be continuing to explore options. But as of right now, that's not something we're going to be doing in the near future. So before I pass it back over to Brian Hosick with Administrative Services, I guess I'll ask Greg if there's any questions that happened to come online while I was visiting.
Jeb, we did have one that came in. We were talking about when you were mentioning about deer hunting and access for like plots lands. This gentleman had a question and asked if we thought about doing something similar to South Dakota with walk-in acres for public hunting. He said we tried it with plots, but in his hunting zone, he doesn't see many plots due to land acquisition. So he wanted to know what your thoughts were with that.
Well, our plots program is, every state has their little bit different twist on their access programs. Our plots program has worked for the most part very well for us. And yeah, I guess I'm sorry this individual, doesn't have the plots acres in his particular area. I mean, that we obviously work with the landowners that we can that are willing to enroll in the program. We try to offer as a wide variety of options as we can to create interest with landowners. We know in some areas, obviously, we lost a lot of plots opportunities when some CRP acreage went off the landscape, and of course not just plots opportunities, but some really high quality plots opportunities when those contracts expired. So we do the best we can, obviously, with the individual landowners, but we have to have willing landowners to get those acres signed up.
And since we have you there, Jeb, there's another one on, are the results of the study such as collared elk or mountain lions made available to the public?
Yes, all of our research projects that are completed, we don't release that information until those studies are completed. But once any of our research projects are completed, we try to keep those up to date on our Game and Fish website under our research tab.
And one more that came in, Jeb, and this one pertains to blue-winged teal, and he's wondering to know if we ever thought about an early season for blue-winged teal similar to other states.
So the blue-winged teal early season is a little bit complicated due to the fact that it's not North Dakota Game and Fish setting those regulations. It's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Central Flyway Council, which I sit on. Other states have taken advantage of some early season blue wing opportunities, but there's an assessment that goes along with that. It's a 3-year assessment, and they're called spy hunts, where the department has to go out and literally spy on individuals that are hunting in those early season opportunities to make sure there's not other species being harvested during that time frame, because we obviously at that time there's a lot of brown ducks on the landscape. And so that's a bit of a long answer with that, but it's a long process for us to have to do that. And so that's why we have not pursued that option, just due to the amount of work and time that would have to go in that without a guarantee of being approved.
Okay, and just to pull you back into big game, one more question, Jeb, is he asked, when should I expect to be able to get my CWD results back from 4B?
Our CWD results have been coming in, within 2 to 3 weeks. And so depending on when that sample was submitted, usually within a 2 to 3 week time frame is when we're seeing those results back.
Okay, thank you, Jeb. That's all.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Brian Hosick with Administrative Services to talk about some licensing issues.
Thanks, Jeb. My name is Brian Hosick. I'm going to talk a little bit on some updates on the online licensing systems in regard to vendors and credit card fees here. To start, I'm going to go into a little bit of history on our online licensing system. We developed the online licensing system in 2001. At that time, we still offered and processed paper applications. We took these developments from this system and we extended this to some of our registered licensed vendors. Again, a mixed bag of people applying online or still making use of some of the paper licenses and applications. After that, some of our other services followed, including our online lotteries, watercraft registrations, hunter education. Very similar there, we did have a mixed bag of online and paper applications at that time. So over the years, we monitored these trends and these sales of these licenses, and once it got to a point where we had a majority, in some cases greater than 90, upper 90s or greater than 90%, we made that decision to move some of these to be exclusively online, and we began to transition our systems over to that platform. In 2016, license sales went exclusively online, and that was followed by the lotteries in 2018 and watercraft registrations in 2020. This transition helped us to make significant improvements to the services we provided. Examples include some of the things that came up in many advisory board meetings with the turning around our lottery results a little faster. So we were able to accomplish that and improve the time for us to get those results ran. And we also looked at simplifying some of our license structure and also looking at tailoring that experience of the user experience of the individual online and providing a lot of information there. Whether it be youth or non-residents gratis or 65 and older licenses, we can provide that information for them. Then, as mentioned in almost every presentation and as deserved, I guess, is the COVID-19 pandemic. The decisions we made to move exclusively online, it put us in a really good position. Helped us to continue to deliver services without any disruptions. And this year especially, we were in the midst of a new 3-year watercraft registration cycle. And so with our offices open by appointment only, we were able to register and renew over 60,000 watercraft with minimal disruption. And as mentioned earlier too, with the online hunter education, we were able to kind of proceed and continue to deliver those services. Online service updates here. So yeah, we are continue to seek enhancements in that user experience for these systems. We've made a lot of progress on the self-service systems and implemented many features on that online licensing system platform. The self-service system I'm referring to is the one that that you've either visited on a computer or on a phone. We do have other systems that are used by our department staff and available to our licensed vendors. And so what we really want to do here is all the effort and progress we made on those self-service systems. We want to extend those and those capabilities to our vendors, and as well as the staff in our district offices. We do recognize that we have folks that do not prefer the self-service option or do not have access to a computer or mobile phone. So we want to extend those services through our vendors and through our district offices there. Again, continue to improve that user experience when buying, applying, or interacting with licensing systems. We talked about this even last spring. We had that general game and habitat license. We want to streamline this process to get the proper licensure for those that are using these systems. And so we're seeking those opportunities in any way we can do that and really get folks in and out of the system as quickly as possible. We're exploring our license season and any convenience at the time of application. When we're looking for these conveniences, we're really trying to find what's going on during that license season. So April 1st through March 31st is our license season here, and we recognize that we have different things going on, different applications. A lot of times, folks are coming back to visit us to either apply for a lottery or purchase a license or register for dark house spearfishing. But we do have several applications in the early spring turkey, moose, elk, sheep, where it's really before that license season has even began. And so we'd like to take advantage of those opportunities when you're coming to apply to purchase that season license and kind of get it all in one step there. So we're considering different things and trying to gather some ideas. I know we get a lot of questions on the ability to apply for a lottery earlier, the deer gun lottery earlier. Some of these are a little more challenging. We have to wait for the proclamations there, and technically we do not have a season available yet. So you can imagine things like pronghorn, where we've had to limit some seasons there. We just need to have those. We don't really have that information until the proclamation. So yeah, looking at some options here. We, considering, moving the license season, there's a lot of pros and cons of this. If we were to consider something like this, we have to, think of who that would impact. There's challenges for our late season ice anglers, and some good comments last night that came up about that. We're really trying to find the sweet spot of when folks are transitioning over. And we know in North Dakota how that works out. We have, we can get past our normal license season of April 1 and there's still people ice fishing past April 1. So that, we understand that happens. And when's the good time for the reminder to go buy that next season license? So we're looking for some feedback on this. Again, we got some good comments on this. A lot of things to consider here. Things we can take advantage of pre-purchasing. We've done some things many years ago with allowing you to purchase 2 licenses or pick the season license you wanted. Some of that was disastrous with people picking the wrong one, and so we learned from some of those mistakes. But again, trying to find that sweet spot. Our online services licensed vendors. We have 128 licensed vendors statewide. They provide tremendous services, especially after hours or when state offices are closed. They provide the services I mentioned before with providing those that don't have access to the internet, computer, or mobile phone here. There's also some mutual benefit here, especially for those that make use of those vendors. They purchase their license and then go get their equipment, gear, bait and tackle. So some convenience there as well. However, as I kind of mentioned before, they're utilizing a somewhat antiquated system that we've provided that really hasn't had all the enhancements that we made to our self-service or public-facing systems here. We do have a range, with our vendors. We have a range of experience. I mean, we have some that have some tremendous history with us and some knowledge of the Game and Fish licensure. But we do have, we also have vendors that have, their new staff, and they need to be trained on what to sell here. So our vendors do work with our department. If there's any changes to licensing, work with our department staff here. We're really looking at this, the current vendor system that we have is, with its limited capabilities, it just doesn't offer the features that self-service system has. Our goal is to transition our vendors to use this self-service system. Again, it will ensure proper licensure. This platform is more intuitive for licensed vendors and inexperienced staff. There's more validation of the data quality. We can eliminate some mistakes here. And very important here as well, the cybersecurity challenges. We have, these vendors are accessing state systems, so we want to address our cybersecurity challenges here and limit our vulnerabilities as best we can here. And so in these times with all the challenges with cybersecurity, our vendors would really have to go through the ringer to access the state system. So something we need to think about, had to think about here. Some pros or perks for our vendors here. Improve that process at checkout. We spent a lot of time, again, trying to get you in and out of the system as quick as possible, and that could be extended to our licensed vendors. So the time it takes to move the customer through the line, we think there's some improvements there for them on this system. We want to expand the opportunity for licensed vendors. They can take advantage of these systems here. Many have naturally transitioned over to this system already that were using the previous version here, but they basically will take, many of them, they'll take a laptop and turn it around and allow their customers to come in and make use of that internet access or those systems with the kiosks they provide or just the systems they provide. One other thing here, we do have a limited number of vendors that sell deer bow tags and paddlefish tags. So we do think that the public-facing system can extend that to our other vendors as well. However, it'll be very similar to buying any over-the-counter first-come, first-served license. You buy online, and the tag would be sent through the mail. If needed in a more timely, we also have our district offices during normal business hours there. But most of our sales are conducted this way anyway, but we do recognize we have some vendors that distribute tags over the counter. This would cease and probably take a little planning for some of those that are used to that service that way, but we expect to provide some information to those individuals that are used to buying that way. Our license our licensed buyers again would receive this in the mail or again visit the district office. This for our vendors, it eliminates the needs for our vendors to track sales, tags, inventory, and submitting payments. So a convenience for our vendors as well. So I'll jump over to our credit card fees here. Credit cards have been the primary choice of payment for a long time here. We've watched that trend over the years since going online. And the same for our vendors. Our vendors are primarily credit card sales. In 2017, the North Dakota legislature provided the option for licensed vendors to charge a purchaser up to 3% of a license fee. This was, our vendors are, when they use their point of sale machines, when you swipe your card through their machine, that vendor is charged a credit card transaction fee ranging from 1% to 3%, depending on the credit card that's used. And you can imagine, on a $30 deer tag, that might be 90 cents. On a $250 non-resident deer bow tag, it might be $7. And so they were being assessed those fees for selling and licenses. So it was something that they addressed, plus the services they provide at the till. It was something they addressed in the 2017 legislative session there. Our game and fish department credit card transaction fees, we're sitting at about $800,000 per biennium. And we recognize it as more, and this is continuing to grow and has been over all the years. But as we expect, we expect an additional $200,000 a biennium as we transition, as more transition to that self-service or modified vendor sales there. So there are some state agencies that have implemented or explored the capability to pass these fees on to the customer at the time of purchase. Again, as I mentioned, these fees range from 1% to 3%. We're considering options how to handle these, and we have been monitoring these for a number of years, but we're considering the options how to handle these trending credit card fees. And in the past, we have offset this with the, if you recall, the certificate fee. This is the $1 fee for residents and $2 fee for non-residents. So that fee, it was again from the old system that would basically the certificate going has some history with it, and moving digitally, that's been something that we've been able to compensate on that and offset some of those fees. Looking at this or any changes to that credit card fee, how we can handle that or remove it or change some of these things. These would take modifications or take some legislative changes to do so. And that's all I have on the credit card fees and vendors. Again, there's some things that we're considering here. If you have some thoughts or questions on that, by all means, please send those to ndgf@nd.gov. Be happy to hear from you on some of these things. And thank you for your time. And if I don't have any questions, I can turn it back to Director Steinwan.
Yes, we do have a question for you, Brian. Basically, as the head of our online application system and licensing system, one came in that, deer applicants can apply for gratis and lottery at the same time. So he's wondering, so why can't moose applicants do the same?
That's a good question. Yeah, the preferential landowner, that's moose license is a competitive license. It's a lifetime license. Obviously, the odds of drawing as a preferential landowner are quite, improved or higher than you would have been considering the lottery. That's something to consider. I think that was, it's something we've done for deer. It'd be, something that we can certainly think about and see what changes it would take to make that happen.
Okay, thank you, Brian. That's all we have.
Thanks. I'll turn that back to Director Steinwan.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you everybody for the presentations. We have to do this more often. Brian doesn't call me Director Steinwan very often. It's usually something else. So thank you, Brian. I know we had a question for Greg come in online asking for clarification, so I'm going to ask Greg to come up and provide some clarification on that.
There was a follow-up question here a half hour ago. I was talking about dealing with facts and no misinformation out there. And as soon as I was done, there was a question that came in the chat line that said that I did not provide some facts. So I want to circle back to this one particular table and the tournament. I did not name the tournaments, but if you look, and perhaps I should have spent more time, the number of larger North Dakota sponsored tournaments that would be impacted by this change are A through E here. They're not named, but they do include the person that inquired about it does include the tournaments, the big name tournaments that most people know associate with in-state North Dakota tournaments. So they are covered and there are impacts. They're right there on this table. In addition to that, there's 3 other out-of-state tournaments, 2 of which would be impacted, not the third would not, but 2 would be impacted by the change. So the information is there. These are the facts, and maybe just some, like Terry said, some clarification. And I also probably should have mentioned this too, that we are actively still talking with CVBs and stuff to try to lessen impacts, to see where go with these groups. Again, I think it's critically important that whatever ultimate we go with this, it's fair. It's all tournaments are treated the same. So that's where we're still there. We're actively, again, talking with some of the CVB groups, and we'll be here in the next few weeks. So that.
Greg, since you're up there, there's a couple questions that did come in too. Similar to last night, they just wanted to know if you could explain the management of the cormorants.
Cormorants, you know, that this is an Eastern Advisory Board get together. If we were in Cogswell tonight, or Cayuga, or Rutland, or Hankinson, somewhere like that in the southeast, inevitably that question would have come up. It does all the time. It's a fair question, good question. Where are we at with cormorant management in North Dakota? Maybe there is actually some new news, so I'll share that. But for those that don't know, cormorants are a fish-eating bird. They consume on average 1 to 1.5 pounds of fish per day. And the fact that North Dakota over summers breeds tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of them, they can have quite the impact. In the big picture, probably not. In localized areas, for sure. And that's where we get a lot of issues, a lot of complaints from local landowners, these smaller fisheries where they can come in and wipe out a perch fishery or trout fishery literally in a couple days. Our hands have, because they are a migratory bird, they're protected by the federal government. The Fish and Wildlife Service has been going through a very long process, but reviewing some of their permitting to the states. And there's a possibility come next summer that Game and Fish, the state agencies, the game wardens and biologists will have maybe a few more tools in the toolbox to deal with cormorants. In the big picture, it's not population control throughout North America or anything like that, but you know, at least we could react to maybe some of the local problems. But as it is, the last few years, we may harvest 100 birds, a couple hundred birds out of, again, tens or hundreds of thousands, so it's hardly impacting them, but there might be something that we can do a little more of in the future. So we'll probably bring everybody up to speed in the spring advisory board meetings.
And one more for you, Greg, since you're there. This gentleman would like to know, what have you heard about the success of the salmon season?
Well, there's 2 parts, I guess. He probably is more interested in salmon fishing himself. That, you know, it's been a bit of oddity. Sakakawea salmon, that's our only real fishery, is in Sakakawea, sometimes in the tail race, but the salmon fishing has been, last number of years, been slow. This 2020 was better, certainly, than 2019. Certainly the size of the salmon was much better. The oddity part of it is the fish are there, and you know, the fishing should be better than it's been. And it's a little bit hard to explain, at least on our behalf. There's a lot of forage in the lake, but some of these salmon fishermen, you know, boy, they have a lot of patience, but they may spend a day or two with one trip or maybe a fish. And then come fall, like this last fall, our crews go out into the bays of Sakakawea, like historically where they're always at. And at times you literally almost can walk on salmon backs. So we've had a very good, it may have been one of the shortest, if not the shortest, salmon spawning seasons, because there's just a whole lot of fish out there. And again, I think the future is positive because we have water, we have smelt, and the size of the fish has really improved. So stay tuned. As long as Secaucus has water, we'll have a salmon fishery in that lake.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, we have some section line enforcement type questions and trespass questions, and we have our Chief of Enforcement, Scott Winkleman, with us. And Scott, we have a few questions for you.
Sure.
This gentleman sent in about 3 or 4 questions, and the first one has to do with, he said, must we allow walk-in vehicle access along a totally unimproved section line which is posted on both sides?
All right, thanks, Greg. Again, my name is Scott Winkleman. I'm the Chief of the Enforcement Division. That's a good question, and I'm glad it was asked. It's a question that we get fairly often, especially during the fall hunting seasons. Section lines by state law in North Dakota are open for public travel. So the answer is yes, you do have to allow for travel up and down that section line, whether there is a trail there or not, by vehicle or walking, but it is limited to travel only. And there are rare instances where a section line can be closed legally by the county. While rare, it is possible. So that is one thing to keep in mind, but by state law, section lines are open for public travel.
Okay, Scott, another follow-up with that. Are we correct in believing it is not legal to shoot anything in or over a private field or wetland from a section line posted on both sides?
That would be correct, because the section lines are legally open for travel only. They're not open for any other activity. So the landowner on those section lines does own to the middle of the section line. If their land is legally posted, that would prohibit people from hunting on that section line without landowner permission.
And then would that be similar, or would that be different with a county road ditch posted on both sides?
County roads would be a little bit different. Most of the time that same law would apply. They follow section lines. There are occasional county roads or state highways that are built on easements where there was actually the land was purchased for the building of the road. So there are times where that does not apply, but for the most part, those county roads, especially, they are on section lines, and that same would apply.
In instances of clear trespass violation on private land by a hunting party who has jurisdiction, the local game warden or the sheriff?
Okay, so that instance would be a hunting on posted land violation. The answer is both the sheriff and the local game warden would have jurisdiction. Certainly that is would be a hunting on posted land potential violation, and we would be happy to look into that. So people can contact their local game warden directly, or can contact the Report All Poachers line, which is 701-328-9921, and they will get a hold of the closest local game warden, and we would be happy to look into that.
And then moving away from the section line trespass questions, another one came in, and this is the final one for you, Scott. Why is there such a difference across the state in hunting and fishing violation fines?
Well, the answer is each county is unique, and each case is unique. There's different factors involved throughout the investigation, but ultimately each county has its own prosecuting state's attorney. You involve a defense attorney many times, and then ultimately, and they both go back and forth and recommend potential fines, and then ultimately it's the district court judge who hands down the sentence. So there's many, and they take different factors into their consideration. Ultimately, those three parties get together and the judgment, the amount of the fine would be decided, and it can be different between counties when you involve different people and different packs.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have some questions for Deputy Director Scott Peterson. Scott? The first one pertains to crossbows, and she asks, why isn't North Dakota like other states? If a person is over 60, they can hunt with a crossbow without a special permit.
So that's a good question, Greg, and it's one that we hear actually on a pretty regular basis. But give you a little background, first of all, and I'm assuming that most of the listeners are probably already aware of this, but crossbows are not defined as a legal weapon in North Dakota during the archery season, and so unless you have in your possession a special permit issued by the department, and the authority that allows us to issue those permits is contained within state law, and they specifically limit those issuance of those permits to an individual who's either blind, paraplegic, or has lost the use of one or both arms. And so for an individual to be considered for one of those permits, you'd have to get a permit application from the department, and they're available on our website, and you have to take those to your medical provider, and that medical provider would have to certify that they have a legitimate medical condition and that they meet one of those above criteria, the three criteria that we mentioned, that they can't pull back a 35-pound bow. And so those medical providers, those permit applications can be signed now by either a licensed physician, a certified nurse practitioner, a certified physician's assistant, or a licensed chiropractor. And so in order for a person to be, again, considered for that, they have to meet one of those conditions. And so in order for us to consider issuing a permit from some group of individuals other than those three, would take legislative action, because the department doesn't have the authority either through policy or proclamation to issue those.
And one final question for you, Scott. Are you still pursuing a new boat access site at Alkaline Lake?
Okay, another good question, and we're going to make an assumption here that the individual's talking about Alkaline Lake in southern Kidder County. It's a very popular fishery, highly used, and we currently have in place with the local landowner agreement for our existing boat access site, and that landowner, back up a little bit, that agreement is set to expire this coming summer, and the landowner is not interested in signing a long-term agreement with us, and for very good and very valid reasons. But based on the use of that existing boat ramp, I mean, for a number of reasons. First of all, it's waiting lines, but there's also a real safety issue there with the waiting times for people to get off the water if a thunderstorm would happen to come up very quickly. We think there's a real need there for a double lane or a double wide boat ramp, and so the decision has been made to develop a new boat access site on our property. We have some property just east of the existing site, and we're going to be developing that, and we'll be able to include expanded parking areas and a wider ramp. And but that is going to take a considerable amount of work, and so we're right now in the process of procuring the proper permits so that work can begin this coming spring.
Okay, thank you, Scott. That's all we have for you. And our final questions for the evening will be for Director Terry Steinwan.
Go ahead, Greg.
Terry, there's three questions that we have remaining. The first one deals with up in the Devil's Lake area. And he says, with the COVID problems in Canada closing to American hunters, the bulk of hunters heading to Canada, coming to North Dakota instead caused a logjam of hunters in Devil's Lake Basin. To add fuel to the fire, we now have non-resident guides and outfitters offering cash to landowners to lease their entire farm for the entire season. Why are we letting these outfitters to come here, set up shop, and eliminate opportunities for local hunters? If this pandemic continues, this problem will only get worse. Now is the time to be proactive instead of reacting when it will be too late. How can we ensure this trend stops?
Well, number one, let's hope the pandemic doesn't continue. We know there's vaccinations coming relatively soon. That is irrelevant to the question, though. To our knowledge, or to my knowledge, there is only one non-resident guide and outfitter up in that, working up in there, at least licensed in that area. If some non-resident is doing it illegally, we certainly encourage you to contact your local game warden or Scott Winkleman or one of the unfortunately, or unfortunately, whichever your perspective is, the Devil's Lake area is a real popular waterfowl hunting spot. There's no doubt about it. As long as these guides have met all the criteria, we have to issue a license. They pay their fee, we give them their guide's license, guide and outfitter license. There's nothing illegal about them paying a landowner, there's nothing illegal that the landowner's doing. So I'm really not sure what we can do any short of legislative action at this point in time. That really is the only recourse, because as long as those criteria are met, we are mandated to give them a license.
Okay, next question for you, Terry. Pertains to the federal waterfowl stamp in regards to its expiration date when purchased online. He said it's obvious that everything is going more towards online and electronic versions of things, as when you get stopped by a warden, the screenshot of your license is sufficient evidence you have a license. My question is, can North Dakota do away with the expiration date on the federal waterfowl stamp when you purchased electronically? The proof is on the license it was purchased, and I just feel for those of us who do 98% of our licensing and any game and fish contact online, now it would just be a lot easier than having to remember to carry a little stamp with all year long.
Agree with this individual more. We've actually asked, and I guess I'll preface my major answer with those regulations and those requirements are actually set by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through their Service Regulation or SRC, as Service Regulation Committee or SRC. Jeb mentioned earlier that he sits on the Central Flyway Committee as a game and fish representative from North Dakota. And we've actually requested exactly what this individual is saying is, why do you need it? Some people like to collect stamps, and that's fine. But this individual is right. It shows right on the license that you print out or that you save to your phone, whatever it might be, that you have purchased a license. So we'll continue to ask that question, and hopefully one of these days we can get exactly what he wants and what we want.
And the final question of the evening, he said this year it felt like there was a lot of out-of-state waterfowl hunters, and many landowners quit giving permission in the area because of the amount of people contacting them. He would like to know if you think there'd be a cap of out-of-state waterfowl license in the future, and wanted to know if there was even more out-of-state hunters this year compared to in the past.
I'll answer the last part of that question first. In fact, fortuitously, I looked at the license sales today. We're about, probably about, I want to say 35% above last year, but we're well within the range of what we've had for the last 10 years. And I'll just say it out loud, right around 24,000 non-resident waterfowl license sales. There are two zones, and those are statewide, so a lot of that could be concentrated in Devil's Lake, but not in the Devil's Lake Basin, but not necessarily. In terms of a cap on it, I don't know how long this individual is hunting in North Dakota. Sounds like he's pretty passionate. He or she is pretty passionate about waterfowl hunting, and that's greatly appreciated. We need that. Back in the early 2000s, there was a real, what you call a waterfowl war between residents and non-residents. And at that point in time, the department put together what's called the hunter pressure concept. That information is outdated. Our waterfowl biologist is currently looking at updating what could possibly be done. But again, if there's a cap, it would have to be done by the legislature. But at this point in time, there might be more, or might have been more. I don't think there's probably that much right now in the Devil's Lake area, although there is open water up there. it would have to go through the legislature, and I don't know what their appetite would be for restrictions on non-residents. I will say the last time that came up again, I think it was 2003, there was talk of a cap. Honestly, it brought in more non-resident waterfowl hunters at that point in time. So it kind of negated what it was. It has backed off from that point in time. The biggest issue we see is the resident waterfowl hunters have really dropped off. They really dropped off in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, came back a little bit, not to what they were before, but we aren't seeing that interest now. It might be for the reasons this individual talked about. There's just so much pressure out there, and the landowners are getting basically hunter fatigue is what I would call it, asking for access. But we would hope we can work around that situation without having to go to the legislature or anything. But in terms of a cap for the future, that would have to be set by the legislature.
Okay, thank you, Terry. That's all the questions we have.
Well, again, we appreciate it. We're relatively early here. We have 15 minutes late before, or 15 minutes left before we sign off. But we've really exhausted the questions, I believe, that have come in. Correct, Greg?
Yep.
Nothing else. Some of the questions that we did receive through email, like I said at the beginning, we will be answering via email. Some of them are fairly complicated, and honestly, some of them we have to research a little bit to make sure we're answering correctly. So with that, again, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. Hopefully we answered your questions. May not have been exactly the way you wanted them answered, but we did answer them. I want to thank the staff here for their great job and presentation, and not only here, but across the state. You do have a great game and fish department. We're one of the tops in the nation, I believe, in terms of providing a resource for everybody to enjoy. So with that, we'll sign it off. Last advisory board meeting for this year, and let's keep our fingers crossed that next spring we can hold these in person and we can have that personal contact again. It's much better for us. It's much better for you. We have that personal relationship. We've built some great relationships, made some great friends over the years. So let's hopefully next spring we can do it again. So thank you, everybody, and we'll sign off.